fertility clinic hides a dark secret.
I'm beginning to wonder what I've got myself into.
Something's probably going to happen. And I don't want to be around.
Help me.
What happens when man dares to play God?
Hello? Who let you out?
And science fact has overtaken science fiction. A new thriller, Chimera, starts soon on HTV.
Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm weak, maybe I'm strong. Maybe I'll win, maybe I'll lose, and maybe I'm in for crying the blues, but nevertheless I'm in love with you. May the gloss in Ross be a good gloss. May the windowsills of Winchester shine. Ceilings cover well. The walls of Birmingham, white, clean of knee and ham, and the skirting boards of mine have a long line. So brush in and decorate this land with the best way.
Separate detergent and softener could mean spending more than you need. Stop. Why buy two? Just buy Bold. It's where the smart money goes.
I've just discovered something amazing. An incredible new press-on towel that keeps me feeling fresher and drier than ever before. New Vespre silhouettes. They're covered in a revolutionary new material called Stay Dry. No ordinary towel has it. It lets wetness through and holds it inside the pad, so it's kept away from me. It's amazing. I feel fresher and drier than ever before. New Vespre silhouettes keep you drier than any other towel ever.
Now we join Trevor MacDonald and Fiona Armstrong for the ITN News. The time is 10 o'clock.
Douglas Brand, jailed for life for spying in Iraq, is freed. Delors-Hurd clash, Britain rejects plans for federal Europe. Mr. Brooke gets Ulster parties around the table and talking. Too late for some, South Africa abolishes race classification. And the state of calamity left by volcano Pinatubo. Within the last hour, Iraq has announced that Douglas Brand, the British engineer jailed for life for spying, has been freed on the personal orders of President Saddam Hussein. His release came after secret negotiations between the Iraqi president and the former Prime Minister Edward Heath. The talks were so secret that the Prime Minister, Mr. John Major, was apparently only told about them after Mr. Brand was let out of prison. Mr. Heath said tonight he welcomed Mr. Brand's release and he hoped it would be seen as a step forward in relations between Britain and Iraq. We'll have a report in a few minutes.
The Foreign Secretary, Mr. Hurd, said no today to a European Community document referring to Europe's federal destiny. That means a sort of United States of Europe. Mr. Hurd said the community should operate as a group of nation-states, that Britain was against any wholesale transfer of power to Brussels. Mr. Hurd, at a foreign ministers' meeting in Luxembourg, also said references in the EC document to a single European currency should be taken out. The President of the European Commission, Monsieur Jacques Delors, said European Union was far too important to take into consideration a momentary political problem in one EC member state. In a speech in Chicago tonight, Mrs. Thatcher is expected to say that if the European community suppresses nationhood, it will destroy itself.
Outside today's talks, as the Foreign Secretary arrived, a noisy protest from striking civil servants. Within, he was to face a serious threat to the government's hopes of cooling the political temperature of the European debate. The community's foreign ministers had gathered to consider the latest draft of a plan for European political union. It was intended to be a compromise that would satisfy both Britain and those who believe in a United States of Europe. It failed, and the issue could now provoke a row between John Major and the other community leaders at next week's EC summit. The ideas for European political union being discussed today are based on what is known, in the somewhat abstruse jargon of community negotiators, as the temple concept. At the top, the Council of Europe, that's the term for the 12 community heads of government who meet regularly at EC summits. Below, 3 so-called separate pillars which would divide the principal areas of the community's activities. Cooperation would be closest on economic and trade matters. This pillar would be based on the Treaty of Rome, which already exists. But cooperation in 2 other areas, internal national issues like law and the police, and external issues like foreign policy, would be dealt with separately. Britain supports the concept of a temple structure. It's the inclusion of a reference to Europe's federal destiny that's alarmed the government. It's the first time the phrase has appeared in the draft.
The founders of the community were wise. They did not talk about a federal destination for Europe or a federal vocation. They talked about an ever closer union. That suits us. That is what we're working. And we're prepared to see it come ever closer. But we're not prepared to see a definition. We're not prepared to accept a definition in this new treaty which lays down that there will be, at the end, a federal vocation.
Jacques Delors, president of the European Commission and a champion of federalism, took that as a challenge. He effectively accused the British government of nitpicking because of the political problems over Europe it faces at Westminster. And Mrs. Thatcher is tonight expected to provide a reminder of how acute those problems are. She's in America, where she addressed the issue of Europe in March, and it's thought she'll warn that unless the European community preserves nationhood, it'll collapse. It was reported she'd toned down her remarks. Some of her allies now say that Mr. Delors' words could provoke her to speak her mind.
What worries us is that Mr. Delors' plans almost allow no powers to Westminster. It's not really a question, quite frankly, of whether we hold on to power here, but we're taking away the power from a democracy. If people don't like what the government's doing, they can chuck out the government and put in another one. If you don't like what Brussels is doing, there's absolutely nothing which the people can do about it. I think if Mrs. Thatcher points out the dangers to democracy of the EC, this will be good.
John Major will be arguing Britain's corner in Luxembourg next week. He will once again be faced with the need to reconcile the demands of Britain's community partners with the dangers of a split within his party.
Nervousness about Mrs. Thatcher's speech tonight helped put sterling under renewed pressure on the foreign exchange markets. In London, the pound closed at 2.92 Deutschmarks, down a pfennig on the day. Against the American dollar, it lost nearly 1.5 cents.
Now back to our main story, and within the last hour, Iraq has announced that Douglas Brand, the British engineer jailed for life for spying, has been freed on the personal orders of Saddam Hussein.
Douglas Brand was arrested last September while trying to escape from Iraq. A former member of the Special Boat Squadron, he'd been working for the Iraqis to help clear underwater mines from the Shatt al-Arab waterway, which was littered with explosives after the Iran-Iraq war. Brand was charged with spying and last month was sentenced to life in prison. At the family home in Bankery near Aberdeen, his wife Rosemary campaigned for his release, insisting that he was a businessman, not a spy. The case was also taken up by former Prime Minister Edward Heath, who visited Baghdad during the Gulf crisis to persuade Saddam Hussein to release British hostages. Mr. Heath says he now hopes the release of Mr. Brand will be seen as a step forward in resolving the problems between Britain and Iraq. But the news took Brand's friends by surprise.
I was talking to Rosemary, Mrs. Brand, only an hour ago, and we were making plans for her to come down here in 2 days' time to attend the service at Westminster Cathedral, which is being given on behalf of Ian Richter, who, as you know, is still held prisoner in Baghdad. And neither Rosemary or I had any knowledge of the fact that Mr. Heath was intervening on behalf of Douglas.
The British government has also told Iraq that it would block any move to lift United Nations sanctions until Mr. Brand was released.
Historic inter-party talks on the future of Northern Ireland have finally begun after 7 weeks of negotiations by the Northern Ireland Secretary, Mr. Peter Brooke. The talks at Stormont were the first round-table discussions between the province's political leaders for 16 years. They went ahead after last-minute agreement from the Reverend Ian Paisley to the Australian diplomat Sir Ninian Stephen as chairman of the second stage of the talks, which will involve the Dublin government.
Mr. Brooke arrived to convene what, in his own words, should be a new beginning for Ulster politics. But no sooner had the table been set for talks than the Democratic Unionists left Stormont. They were giving last-minute consideration to the choice of chairman for the second stage talks involving the Irish government. But fears of another major impasse soon subsided, with Northern Ireland Minister Brian Mulroney saying the DUP needed more time. And minutes later, they duly returned, saying yes to the choice of chairman, Sir Ninian Stephen. The former Australian Governor-General helped the country through its deepest modern crisis after the sacking of Gough Whitlam's Labour government. He has also campaigned for the rights of Aborigines and ethnic minorities. It's believed he'll provide a calm centre for the talks here, and also a strong sense of purpose. With his acceptance, Stage 1, the inter-party talks on Northern Ireland's political future, was set to begin. Not everyone involved, though, wanted to describe them as historic.
Let's not say anything until we have the outcome. And that's why we kept all you press men out, because I said, and I still continue to say, the time to take photographs is when we have achieved something.
Each party leader had 2 delegates at the table and others sitting behind them. Unionists were to the right of the Secretary of State, Nationalists to the left. At 1 to 1, Mr. Brooke, flanked by Stormont Minister Brian Mulroney, delivered the opening statement on an initiative that's been nearly 18 months in the making. John Alderdice of the Cross Community Alliance and John Hume of the SDLP set out their party's positions on devolution and power sharing. The 2 unionist leaders raised questions. They'll present their statements tomorrow morning. Mr. Brooke's tireless effort to bring the parties together has reached a milestone, but what lies ahead will be fraught with difficulty, particularly Stage 2, when the unionists will be head-to-head with the Irish government. In the chair for those talks will be Sir Ninian Stephen. The key point won't be his knowledge of Irish affairs. The real test will be his diplomatic skill. Andrew Simmons, News at 10 at Stormont.
Joining us now on the telephone from Melbourne is Sir Ninian Stephen. Sir Ninian, given by your own admission you know so little about the issues involved, what realistic chance do you think there is of your concluding these talks successfully?
I couldn't possibly venture a guess on that. I think that's obviously going to depend very much on the parties themselves and their wish or their determination to reach some conclusion.
Do you not think that you are so much of a compromise candidate that your effectiveness has been, in effect, been reduced before you actually begin to chair these talks?
Well, again, I think that's going to be a matter for the participants, the extent to which they think that I can usefully be a contributing factor to success.
When do you hope to be in Northern Ireland?
I don't know. Obviously within the relatively near future, but the timetable has not, as far as I know, yet been determined.
Sir Ninian, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Detectives are investigating the deaths of 4 babies who were treated at Grantham Hospital in Lincolnshire. They say it'll be next month before they know whether there was a criminal cause for the illnesses which killed the babies. The police are also investigating unexplained respiratory attacks in 14 children who'd been in the same ward. One nurse is now on police bail.
5-year-old Brad Gibson is one of the youngsters at the centre of the inquiry. He spent today happily at school. But 2 months ago, he had a heart attack after being admitted to the children's ward at Grantham Hospital with a chest infection. At the time, his mother spoke about the shock of his sudden collapse.
When we arrived at the hospital, they ushered us into a small room and asked us if we wanted to talk to the chaplain, who is there for counselling. And the sister who was on duty, well, she came in and told us that Bradley had arrested and there were very serious complications and they weren't quite sure what was going to happen to him.
Police were alerted after another child who collapsed in the hospital was found to have an unusually high level of insulin in his blood. Now all records of patients admitted to the children's ward, including some who died, are being checked. Detectives have confirmed that one nurse has been questioned and released on police bail.
I set up an incident room on the 7th of May, and I'm still looking into that matter. It's too early yet to say whether there is anything at all sinister in this case. Quite clearly, the whole investigation rests upon medical evidence. I have employed senior medical advisors. It's necessary for them all to come together, and I've arranged a meeting for the 2nd of July, at which time the whole matter will be discussed. Until that time, I'm not in a position to say any more.
Tonight, friends and relatives of nurses at the hospital refused to discuss the matter.
Go away.
Terry Lloyd, News at 10, Lincolnshire.
The South African Parliament today repealed the Population Registration Act, which since 1950 has required South Africans to be classified by race. It was one of the basic apartheid laws. President de Klerk said a new constitution, which would give black people the vote, was now possible within a few years. And he said his government would do everything it could to get multi-party talks going.
For Sandra Lang, the repeal of the notorious Population Registration Act came 25 years too late. Born into a white family, at the age of 11 she was reclassified by apartheid as a coloured, a bureaucratic decision which consigned her to a life of poverty among South Africa's disadvantaged black majority.
Even if that didn't happen, I would live a better life. But now I'm not living a better life. I'm just hoping that my kids can grow up.
There was little comfort for her in hearing President de Klerk consign apartheid to the past.
Everybody is free as well from the disparagement and denial which so often were the consequences of the legislation we are repealing. And everybody is liberated from the moral dilemma caused by this legislation, which was born and nurtured under different circumstances in the apartheid era.
The move, which clears the way for sanctions against South Africa to be lifted and its international isolation ended, was opposed only by the pro-apartheid Conservatives.
We are losing our nationality today, but we are certain that we will find new ways of establishing our identity as Afrikaners, and we hope and we pray that in due course we will restore our right to self-determination.
The repeal heralds the end of 4 decades of apartheid, which separated blacks from whites from the cradle to the grave. In those 40 years, thousands of blacks died opposing the system, thousands more were detained and tortured. The Land Acts, limiting black ownership of the land, and the Group Areas Act, determining where blacks could live, have already been repealed. Now, although the existing racial register remains, new babies will not be classified by the colour of their skin, though representatives of the black majority say it will take a generation for things truly to change.
You know, the government is scrapping these laws at a time when whites have been so, empowered that they will continue to be able to maintain apartheid by economic factors. When the sun sets and the factories close down and everything else closes down, the vast majority of black South Africans must head to Soweto.
And blacks still have no vote. They will get that only when a new democratic constitution has been negotiated. Kevin Dunn, News at 10, Johannesburg.
After the general election in India, the Congress party say they'll form the next government, though they're expected to fall about 30 short of an overall majority in Parliament. With 2/3 of the seats declared, Congress I had 186, the Hindu nationalist BJP 77, the Janata Dal and its National Front allies 36, and the Left Front Communists 24. Congress I are considering coalition with any party other than the BJP. They also have to choose a successor to the assassinated Mr. Rajiv Gandhi as party leader and Prime Minister.
And we're going back now to our main story, the release of the British engineer Mr. Douglas Brand from Iraq on the personal orders of President Saddam Hussein. On the telephone now is Mr. Brand's son, Mr. Michael Brand. Mr. Brand, were you aware of the attempts to free your father by Mr. Heath?
We were only vaguely aware. We knew the Foreign Office was doing everything in their power to get him released, but we weren't in on the specific details of what was being done.
And when did you know the specific details tonight?
About an hour ago.
Have you had a chance to talk to your father?
No, we haven't. We believe he's still actually in Iraq and will be travelling to Amman tomorrow morning, where he'll be handed over to the British authorities there.
Have you had any idea at all about his awareness of the attempts being made by Mr. Heath to set him free?
We have none at all. It's literally come so quickly that we haven't been able to get any further information.
And when was your last contact with your father?
The last time we spoke to him was at the end of August last year.
Mr. Brand, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Scientists in the Philippines say the worst of the volcanic eruptions from Mount Pinatubo are probably over. But the exodus from the worst affected areas gathers pace. A report next. Plus, John Smith says Labour will have a minimum wage, whatever the unions think. And the real Lady Aberdare stands up. That's in a couple of minutes.
I love you very much. I love you very much. Hi, Annie. How are you? Oh, good. You're fine. Yes, I'm fine. It's fine. Annie, Bye. Dear Annie, did I say fine? What I meant to say was, I love you.
For a family day out that's really different, visit Oakwood Park. You pay only once, and after that, all the rides are free. Whatever your age, Oakwood's fun for everyone.
Replacing all of this because of water damage might cost £300. Could I have prevented it?
Yes, with Thompson's water seal.
Repairing this water damage properly could cost me hundreds.
Thompson's water seal would have prevented it. Brush Thompson's onto wood, brick or a concrete patio, and it penetrates to form a long-lasting barrier water can't get past.
Now I can prevent water damage and save money with Thompson's water seal.
Thompson's water seal, a great defense against repair expense.
What I meant to say was, I love you.
Don't get stuck without a stamp.
Scientists in the Philippines say the volcano Mount Pinatubo is calming down after a week of violent eruptions which have killed more than 100 people. A second United States aircraft carrier is now on its way to the area to help to rescue 20,000 American military personnel and their families who are stationed near the volcano. A fleet of US warships has already taken 5,000 of them to safety.
Escaping the volcano in style tonight, Americans clamber aboard the US Navy's brand new aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln. 5,000 left today, servicemen's wives and children and family pets. They'll sail to the Philippine island of Cebu, and from there charter flights will take them home to the States.
I want to get away from the danger. Well, I hate leaving my husband, but there's not much to stay for.
They're leaving a Subic Bay naval base almost buried under volcanic ash and mud. More than 100 buildings collapsed. A young American girl was killed. There's no power or water, only puddles to shave in. In Olongapo City, the ash will take months to clean up. In places, it's more than a foot deep. Whole rows of buildings were destroyed under the weight of sludge. Homes, shops, businesses, a church, and the local bus station. Several people were crushed to death. The body count continues to rise.
It's a world-class disaster. The whole city is in shambles. It's just like a nuclear bomb hit us, you know, it's just like that movie The Day After. Well, we're gonna get over it.
The international airport in Manila remains closed tonight. The ash even falling here, 55 miles from the volcano. In Manila and other affected areas, schools also remain closed, and today the health department advised people to stay indoors until the ash dust stops falling. More than 115,000 Filipino refugees have now made it to evacuation camps in the capital. The President, Cory Aquino, has pledged more than £2 million in aid for these victims, many of whom have lost their homes forever. Mark Austin, News at 10, Manila.
Here, the Shadow Chancellor, Mr. John Smith, said today Labour wouldn't abandon its plans for a national minimum wage, despite opposition from some trade unions. He told electricians at their Blackpool conference that Labour wouldn't turn its back on the low paid. He said a floor on wages would raise Britain's social standards. The elections and the engineers are against a national minimum wage because they want to keep skilled workers paid differentials. The Conservatives say the Labour plan would cost 2 million jobs.
The Shadow Chancellor was in no mood to compromise with the electricians this afternoon. Yesterday, their leader, Eric Hammond, had called a compulsory minimum wage fundamentally wrong. Mr. Smith said it was essential if a Labour government would adopt its social charter.
That is why the Labour Party is clear we need to introduce statutory enforceable legal minimum wage as part of the obligation to the community and also part of a clear democratic decision we've arrived at in the movement.
Labour wants everyone to be guaranteed £40 an hour. That's just about half the average hourly wage, rising 2/3 when the country can afford it. They claim that would 4 million out of the poverty trap, but with £2.5 billion country's wage bill. Campaigners against low pay are enthusiastic.
Something like 10 million workers in now earn less Council of Europe's decent threshold. The taxpayer pays in trying to subsidise those firms continue to pay low wages, and their work have to have wages topped through security benefits. The employed pay because those families do not have the same power to be able to buy the goods and services that other people produce.
But the government believe on this issue they have people on the run.
We help the aid, but where they need help, we help them through family credit, which is the sensible way of doing it. What Labour would do is to introduce this absurd policy of a minimum wage, which would destroy the jobs.
Eric Hammond, backed by other union leaders, is adamant opposed. He says unskilled workers get a rise. His skilled workers will also demand a big increase.
If they ended up and we want you to exercise some restraint on your skill aims, then not on. We will not listen to them.
It's around but could have without the sort of skilled workers these delegates represent are the people who voted in large numbers for Mrs. Thatcher, and Labour must ensure they win back. James, News at 10, Blackpool.
Prince Charles, who's suffering from a bad back, has cancelled all one of his engagements until the beginning next month. Last week, he was advised by doctors to give our favourites Poland for the time being because of pain. Prince, who's Colonel-in-Chief of Welsh Guards, will end the parade of Britain's Guard forces in the City of London on Friday.
Mr. Arthur Gill, President of the National Union of Miners, appeared in court in Sheffield today with his General Secretary charged with failure to keep the union accounts. The prosecution said there was no suggestion of dishonesty or personal gain. The case is brought by the Trade Union Certification Officer.
Arthur Gill and the NUM General Secretary Pete Heath arrived for today's hearing in comfort and rest to met a small group of supporters. The two leaders, the NUM, denied charges concerning the maintenance and submission of audited accounts. Top lawyers, including Michael Mansfield, who defended Birmingham 6, have been hard to challenge prosecution. The case expected to last several days, and at court, the prosecution said that allegations concerning Libya and the State Union had a considerable media into its own instigation, using eminent barrister Gavin Lubman QC pushed a report which prompted the citation officer to lay charge against the UM and its leaders. The prosecution had to use Liebman report to back its case, but then argued that because the NUM had commissioned the document, it was protected by privilege. Also contained some hidden information which was not admissible in court. After a day of legal argument, the magistrate ruled some of the material could not be used. Tomorrow, defence lawyers tried to get the case throughout. Mr. Cape, News 10, Sheffield.
Golf, Stewart and Scott Simpson were still tied after 12 holes their playoff round in the US Open in Minnesota and had reached a 10-1 par, start in 2 over. Yes, the seedings for women were announced today, and they were pretty much the ring of the top players in the world. Steffenberg, the men's list, Boris Becker seeded 2, Ivan Lendl 3. Monica Seles, women's #1 seed, by Steph Graf and Gabrielle Sabatini.
And the mains again, Iraq has seen Doug Brand, a British engineer jailed for life spying. It's understood Saddam Hussein with the relief after sent to Britain's Heath. His freedom has been one of the demands of the British government for the lifting of sanctions against Iraq. In this programme, his son Michael, the family, were travelling to Jordan tomorrow to meet him. And the French Secretary, Mr. Hurd, rejected the idea of federal Europe news today in Luxembourg. Mr. Jacques Delors said the European Union was too important to take into consideration a momentary political problem among member states.
Fraud's detectives are still looking for a woman calling herself Lady Abada, who has disappeared together with an estimated £1.7 million from a hospital charity. Rosemary Abadal, the daughter of an ex-doctor, was sacked by charity last week. Police say they're now making inquiries about her as far away as Brazil.
Neighbours in this exclusive side apartment complex, Lady Abauer was the woman who had it all. From the £2,500 a week lavishly finished penthouse to the Bentley limousine, just like this one, which she used to drive work. Now they're learning it was all a fantasy. The tireless charity fundraiser who mingled with royals and said she was worth $3 million, had no title, no fortune, and is wanted by the squad. The photo album shows a glimpse of party-loving lifestyle. The host did the most. These guests bring little than happy smiles. One party for a friend and her pet dog cost £3,000. Her chauffeur, seeing her off-duty, enjoyed the party life. Today he was moving out the £400 a week that she wanted for him.
I've got to go home to my parents.
What do you feel about this?
I'm very upset and shit.
Did you seem genuine?
Of course, yes.
Embedded officials at the National Hospital charity were counting their losses today. The lady has vanished, also missing almost all their funds, £1.7 million.
I don't know who she is, and I don't know where as much of it has already been sent on lavish parties. No doubt everybody's read daily press already.
Lady Aberdare, the fun-loving fake, even bears startling resemblance to the real Lady Aberdare, who lives a modest life in Scotland and is getting lots of calls from her own friends.
Very much so. They've been ringing asking me when he is and how come they haven't been invited to any of the parties.
And the bogus lady is now thought to be starting a long holiday in Brazil. Ken Rees, News at 10, Chelsea, London.
That's 10 tonight from Fiona and from me. Good night.
Good evening. There's going to be quite a change in the weather later this week. Instead of coming from the north, the rain's going to start coming from the west, so we can all look forward to some much warmer rain than we've had over the last few days. So much for the good news. The bad news is for the next 24 hours, it's staying cool and mostly cloudy with a lot of showers around, especially in the north and west. It's the latest pictures from satellite. Most of Britain covered with cloud of one sort or another. The thickest up in the north there, that's where most of the showers are. But out behind me, you can see the next lot of cloud for later this week already moving towards us, and that means more general rain, I think, for southern and western parts of Britain later in the week. Back to tonight, though, first of all, many of the showers in central and eastern parts of Britain will die out, but the further north and west you are, the more likely you are to see more showers and bits of rain through the night. Nowhere particularly cold, as you can see. On to tomorrow, then, a picture much like we're finishing today with, really. A lot of cloud, especially over Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. You may get the odd glimpse of the sun during the day, but really it's a rather cloudy picture with showery bits of rain for time to time. Further south and east we look, well, a little bit of sunshine there, I think, but even then, you're likely to see the showers developing during the afternoon. So by afternoon, most places suffering from the threat of showers or longer spells of rain. A quick look at the temperatures for tomorrow. They're much like they've been today, really. 15 or 16 at best, just into the 60s, more typically 13 or 14 further north. Good night.
Good evening. Now the news for the West Country. Work still going on tonight to reconnect electricity to thousands of homes and businesses in Chippenham. They were cut off after an explosion in a substation this afternoon. No one was hurt, but damage was extensive. Severn Electricity say most properties should be back on power tonight, but the Westinghouse factory probably won't be back on before midnight. The number of shops closing in Bath has doubled in the past year. Traders blame high interest and increases in VAT and business rates.
Bath prides itself on being Britain's second shopping city after London, but even here the retailing recession has begun to bite. Figures out today show that the number of empty shops in the city centre more than doubled in the year to the end of March, from 31 to 70, or 1 in 10 of the total. A pressure group set up to fight for the city's small traders said its fears were being confirmed.
I know it's the classic response, but I think it has to be, we told you so. We started campaigning last year on the issue that shops and small businesses were being forced out of business by high rents and the uniform business rate, and exactly what we said would happen is happening.
In addition, shops have been hit by the increase in VAT, which came into force after the last budget. In a city that prides itself on being a regional shopping centre, empty shops like this are clearly bad for Bath's image. But City Council officials say that the problem isn't noticeably worse than anywhere else, and they're confident that business will pick up again when the recession is over.
We're certainly concerned about it, and we do obviously monitor the number of shops which are empty and try and take effective action for those in the council's own control to ensure that they are relet as quickly as possible. And certainly the indications are, from the shops we have on the market at the moment, that there is a great deal of interest and they are letting remarkably quickly, considering the economic circumstances.
The council say the recession is more to blame for shop closures than rent and rate rises, and they point to the fact that the number of new shops continues to grow. Almost 4/5 of Bath's workforce is in service industries, so the city's Chamber of Commerce is worried about any downturn which hits people's spending power. It's begun a new drive to attract shoppers to the city. More customers can sustain more shops, and that means fewer sites like this.
Thousands of defence jobs intended for the Bristol area may have been lost to Dorset. The county's development committee has been told that a suggestion to switch the jobs from Keynsham to Winfrith has been favourably received by the Ministry of Defence. Jobs from Bath and Portland could also go there. The MOD said it wanted to build offices on the Cadbury factory site in Keynsham, despite objections from Avon County Council and some local protest groups. Now it's looking at other locations, including some in the Bristol area. A final decision is expected in the next few months. In Gloucestershire, parents and teachers are claiming victory in their fight to keep open 4 small schools. They lobbied members of the county's education committee, and members agreed that the schools should stay. There's tight security in Wiltshire this week to prevent hippie travellers reaching Stonehenge for the summer solstice on Friday morning.
The travellers with over 200 vehicles have set up 2 camps on the Wiltshire-Hampshire border. 150 have gathered at Stockbridge, 50 miles east of the monument, and a makeshift camp has been set up in Chilbolton. The travellers have been served with notices under the Public Order Act, requiring them to move on. Over the last few years, police have increased their presence around the stones in the run-up to the summer solstice. A 4-mile exclusion zone has again been set up. There's fears that trouble will fare this year after festivals at Glastonbury in Somerset and Doynton in Avon were cancelled. Police believe the other festivals normally draw the travellers away from Wiltshire.
Bristol today joined the growing number of authorities getting tough on dogs. New bylaws mean it's illegal to let dogs mess in some city parks, and in 4 others dogs have been banned altogether. In Somerset, people from Milverton are campaigning to stop 2 brothers being evicted from the village garage later this week. They say the garage is indispensable.
Milverton residents packed the garage forecourt today to discuss how they can save the business Mervyn and Terry Bellamy have run here for more than 30 years. The brothers have been served notice to leave by the landowners who want to build there. They failed to stop the repossession order in court. Villagers say they'll be there in force on Wednesday when bailiffs call to evict the men.
I'm a woman on my own with a car, and I just rely on them hook, line and sinker.
Residents face a 10-mile trip to Taunton for petrol and repairs if the garage closes. 14 workers at the sawmill next door could also lose their jobs if the land is sold off. For the Bellamys, the strain of contemplating a life on the dole was beginning to tell today. What can you now do, though, to keep the garage open?
Well, we could discuss it with the family if they wish, but they seem quite adamant to get rid of it. Even one member of the family who used to work here has urged his support for us. They won't discuss it, they won't value it, we can't buy it. Where do you go from here?
Landowner Alan Fouracre had nothing to say on the matter at his Wellington home today. Hello, Mr. Fouracre. Volunteers plan to guard the garage round the clock to keep the bailiffs out. They've scarcely seen any conflict at their quiet village before, but the garage, they say, is essential to their rural lives.
An airline pilot on his way to Heathrow to take charge of a flight has been arrested in Wiltshire on a drink driving charge. The pilot, who was due to fly to Venezuela, was charged after failing a breath test near Marlborough. He's been bailed to appear in court next month. A Russian pilot and his English navigator had a miraculous escape today when their microlight hit power lines and crash-landed near Bristol. Sergei Marchesky was taking part in the microlight round Britain race, flying a model made by the Marlborough company Solar Wings.
Is it dangerous?
I think no more dangerous to drive the car.
Today's accident happened after he realised he was running low on fuel and tried to land by a filling station at Tog Hill near Wick. But as they came down, they hit an 11,000-volt cable and crashed 20 feet into the ground. Local people carried them clear, and a nurse who saw the accident gave first aid. Sergei is in Frenchay Hospital but isn't seriously hurt. The fire brigade say the pair were lucky not to have been killed. Now cricket, and Gloucestershire's rain-affected game against Nottinghamshire ended in a draw. Notts were set 281 to win and ended on 165 for 4. And now a look at the weather for the next 2 days. I know we need the rain, but this is getting ridiculous. Guess what it's going to do tomorrow? Just like today, really, mostly cloudy with some heavy and prolonged showers and a moderate northwesterly breeze. Wednesday's outlook, dry and bright at first, but wait for it, rain spreading from the west during the afternoon. That's the news. Good evening.
Now, at Vision Express, half-price lenses. Yes, buy one lens and get one free in about an hour. And there's thousands of frames to choose from at Vision Express.
Oh, what do we got? Packet of new Walker's Ruffles. Yeah, Ruffles are ridged potato crisps. The actual crisp itself shaped into lots of little peaks. Yeah, I'm still here. And if I'm right, these ridges hold in a lot more flavor and make Ruffles extra crunchy. Yeah, good work, Mac. I was right. These Ruffles are damn fine crisps. Ruffles. More ridges, more taste.
You never thought you'd find a Formula One inspired engine in a car that cruises at a whispering 65 decibels. You never thought you'd find anti-lock brakes, catalytic converter, and cruise control in an executive car that takes you beyond convention. Never say never. The Accord 2-liter I from Honda.
If it's delicious and light, it's delight. If it's delicious and it's delight.
If it's delicious and light, it's delight.
If it's delicious and light, it's delight.
Delight is a complete range of products that are high in taste, but lower in fat.
If it's delicious and light, it's delight.
Would you believe bran could be so light? Would you believe bran could be so crisp? Believe light, crisp Kellogg's bran flakes? So light they'll lift your whole day.
Spots like to come out at night. They don't like nuclear is still night clear. So before you say night clear.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late.
Shall we eat first?
It's a good idea.
We'll try that new place, will we?
I do like Chinese, don't know if I fancy it now.
But you like Chinese.
I could handle a spaghetti, definitely.
Not in that tie, you're not. You don't want Chinese, you don't want fish, you don't want a hamburger. What do you want?
Something different.
Made with 100% white-breasted chicken, mayonnaise, and iceberg lettuce. When you want to change, you want a McChicken sandwich.
That's a good film.
Seen it.
Have you? When?
Ah, Mostyn. Here it is. Chez moi. Bit small, isn't it? Compact and bijou, Mostyn. Compact and bijou. You bought this. Not absolutely my first choice.
Now the Alliance and Leicester are offering the best mortgage deals they've had in ages. You needn't cramp your style with Second Best. Pop in and we'll help you buy something a little bit bigger.
Of course, the garden's an absolute picture in the summer.
You get a smarter investor at the Alliance and Leicester.
Hello, now don't forget that your nighttime programmes start off with Sports World Extra at 12:30. Right now, this is a harrowing film, The Hollow Point.